Okay, now we're going to look at the level of government that tends to get people's hackles raised more than any other, and that's school districts. Schools are important to people because their children are being educated in it, and they tend to have they tend to cause a lot of controversy, although they don't have a lot of control over many of the things that are controversial. Okay, so school district organizes pre-K through 12 education for its geographic area. They tend to have elected boards and then appoint a superintendent who is the chief executive of the school district. They may or may not be contiguous to other jurisdictions. So here in California, our county, our school districts don't really follow any rhyme or reason. For instance, the Saddleback Valley Unified School Districts covers parts of Laguna Hills, Laguna Woods, Lake Forest, and all of that. And like the Newport Mesa School District covers Newport Beach and Costa Mesa, whereas some of them are entirely within one jurisdiction, like the Anaheim School District is entirely within Anaheim. And in California, there's no rule about how the jurisdictions are set. In other states, it's not at all uncommon for there to be some kind of state law that the city councils or the school boards will be contiguous with a county or something like that. There are elementary school districts, high school districts, and joint districts. Again, Saddleback Valley, it's Saddleback Valley Unified School District. They run the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools. In Buena Park, there is a Buena Park school district that only does elementary school and middle school, and then their students are part of the Fullerton high school district. And so Fullerton has an elementary school district and a high school district, but the Fullerton High School District actually also encompasses Buena Park. So there's all these kinds of variations. One of the big things about school districts is that they must implement federal and state decisions. So the school board, when they talk about like choosing a textbook, they tend to choose a textbook that's been approved by the state, and they can't go outside of that approval list. The federal government has certain level standards for they have it for curriculum, for testing, for getting certain kinds of special funds and all of that. So a lot of what a school board does is kind of figure out how to make these federal and state policies work within their district. And so again, they don't have a lot of room to be policy entrepreneurs. And there has been a trend towards consolidation. At one point in the US, we had over 35,000 school districts, and now we're down to a little over 13,000. So more and more school districts are becoming larger and larger. Um, there are different types of districts, which are just, it confuses things further. So there's 13,506 independently elected school boards. And then there are another 178 state-dependent school districts. Basically, the school district, the superintendent reports to the state and not to a local school board. This tends to happen when the state has taken over a school district for lack of performance or because there were such bad corruption issues or things like that. And so those are the state dependent school districts. They're independent districts, but they report to the state. And then there are 1,330 local dependent school districts. And so it's not uncommon now for mayors to think that the schools are so bad that the mayor needs to take them over and take control away from the school boards, and that happens in a number of the big cities, and in many small cities. The school board is actually appointed and confirmed by the city council. So there's just a real variety in that respect as well. When we talk about school districts and schools, one of the really important things to note is just how much stakeholders have, how much power stakeholders have, or how many different people are actively interested in the outcome of almost every decision. Where you take something like the state legislature, and when they make a rule about like an agricultural role. People outside the agricultural and interest group just don't get all that riled up about it. But when a school board makes an unpopular decision, a lot of people get riled up about it. So who are the stakeholders? First of all, they're the voters, and every elected official is at the is acting on behalf of voters. Then there are municipal, state, and federal elected officials. So even though they're not involved in the day-to-day things, and they may be making all kinds of rules that affect the school districts, and so they're very interested in the performance of schools. Taxpayers are really concerned about how much they're paying in taxes, and so we saw the school bonds measures across the state, and the most recent Prop 13, not the 78 Prop 13, but the most recent Prop 13 go down because taxpayers said this wasn't a good use of our money. Business owners are very concerned about the type of employees who are coming through the system. Are the people that they're hiring qualified for the jobs that they're doing? Administrators have a huge stake in decisions made by school boards because they are the ones who are kind of executing it on the ground level. Teachers are a very, very powerful union, and they tend to be very well represented. And an individual parent doesn't tend to have a strong connection with the superintendent or even with the principal, but they tend to have very strong connections with teachers, and teachers are able to leverage that public support to influence the policy. Parents have a huge stake in whether or not the schools are succeeding, and when they feel like the schools aren't succeeding, will hold the school board responsible for that. And then finally, children have almost no say in what happens at the school board level. But perhaps out of all of these stakeholders, children are the stakeholders for whom the policy is kind of most influential, whether they come out of school with the kind of education that'll prepare them for the future. And there have been a couple of student-initiated lawsuits recently that have said that the school boards and the state structure and all of that aren't providing them with a fair and equal education. They've tended to lose, but children as stakeholders has actually come up several times recently in the courts in terms of their wishes being represented and their needs being represented. Finally, when we look at the issues surrounding school boards, one of the big ones is funding inequality. So in California, all of the money that we collect in property taxes goes to Sacramento, and it is distributed along a average daily attendance and special needs kind of formula. Most other states do not do this. The property taxes for the local areas go to the local schools, and this can create some fairly severe inequality. You can have neighboring districts where District A has twice the funding per student as District B. One of the things that this plays out in is terms of drawing districts, and so it becomes very controversial where the district lines are drawn, because if you include the rich homes, you'll have more funding, and if you include certain areas where children have higher needs, that it'll cost you more to educate those students. And so because of that, the school board lines where the school board lines are drawn is very, very important. Another thing is that the school boards are implementing budgets. They're dealing with pensions, they're dealing with healthcare, the increasing cost of healthcare, and they're dealing with infrastructure that's been chronically underfunded. And so budget issues are huge at the school board level. The quality of education, people perennially look at students and see whether or not they're qualified for the workforce, for college and things like that. And the responsibility lies on the school boards to ultimately make sure that's happening. Meeting the special educational needs of all of the students is a challenge for school boards. So we have students with special needs in terms of being blind or being having ADD or things like that that the school boards are responsible for taking care of. The English language learners need support to transition into fully English taught classrooms. Gifted students need additional resources because gifted students learn differently, and then talents. There are in throughout the country, there are school districts that set up specific types of schools to meet specific types of students. So the most common one are the arts schools. In the 1970s, Fame made this the TV show Fame made this kind of a national thing. But like in Orange County, we have an Orange County School for the Arts, and so being able to provide special schools for specially talented people in New York. I mean, in LA, there is a high school for highly gifted children. You have to have an IQ over 140 to even get into the school. Okay, so another issue is standards and testing. What are the standards going to be? How are we going to implement the standards? And to what extent is the testing fulfilling what we're trying to do? And you guys have grown up in the testing system, so you know about that. Other regulations and how much flexibility they have and the pushback towards the state and federal control. And then the big one right now is charter schools. And in California, our state superintendent of school race was about whether or not we were going to expand the number of charter schools in California. Ultimately, a person backed by the teachers union won that race, but it's a very contentious issue, and it is people who have access to good quality charter schools love them. But many charter schools have kind of failed in their mission and are drawing money away from public schools. So that's the debate around that.